and welcome to Climate Innovations, a series where we'll be exploring the technology that can shape our green futures. We're here with Dr. Tracy White from CuanTec, a bioplastics company based up in Oban. Hello, Dr. Tracy, how are you doing today?
Hi, Harriet. Lovely to meet you today.
Wonderful. So I wonder if you could introduce yourself and what you do at CuanTec.
Yep, so I'm a microbiologist based at CuanTec, which means I work with very small organisms, particularly bacteria. These tiny organisms, although very small, microscopic in fact, they do a lot of important things in our everyday life. Everything from food processing, such as cheese making, to creating some of the very important medicines that we use on a day-to-day basis. And they're even important for the workings of our own body. So here at CuanTec, we use these microorganisms to process the waste shell coming out of seafood processing sites and prevent them from going to landfill. So these bacteria break down the waste shell for us, and they leave us with a substance called chitin. Chitin is what gives the prawn shell its structure and its support. It's very tough, it's very hard. And from this chitin, we're able to create a compound called chitosan. And from that, we can create a flexible film that would offer an alternative to plastics.
That is really, really cool. So what is CuanTec's ultimate goal? What is your mission with making these bioplastics?
So our mission at CuanTec is to work with fisheries and natural food processors to maximise the value of everything that they get from their harvest, so that it's not just the meat that they're using, it's also their byproducts. As part of that, we want to reduce the impact that food waste and plastic pollution are having on the world around us.
We've seen that there's a lot of threats that plastics can have to marine life. From your experience working with CuanTec, what kind of threats are we seeing in Scotland with plastics and marine life?
So plastics are an amazing material, and they do have some wonderful qualities. They're versatile, they're lightweight, they're durable, they're long lasting. We can have flexible, we can have rigid plastics. However, I think as humans, we've kind of got a little bit carried away with how amazing plastic is, and we're using it for so many different things. So on a daily basis, about half the items of plastic we're using are single use, which means they can't be recycled, they're getting thrown away. We don't really know how long these plastics hang about in the environment. We're just not sure. At the moment, we reckon it's several hundred years, could be up to 1,000 years, and quite often they reach our seas and oceans. I'm sure everyone has walked along the beach at some point and has seen some plastic bottles or plastic kind of packaging that hopefully they've picked up along their way. If they're not collected, a lot of seabirds, sea mammals and fish can become entangled in them. It can lead them to suffocation or drowning. And as I say, plastic is very durable. It lasts a long time in our environment. It doesn't so much break down as break up into smaller and smaller pieces. So that means a lot of our seabirds and fish, mammals, they become confused with this plastic. They mistake it for food and they eat it themselves, or quite often feed it to their young. This can have disastrous effects because they're not getting the nutrition that they need, that they would normally get from their natural diet. Mm-hmm. And it's estimated about 90% of seabirds have plastic in their gut. And over time, these plastics, as I say, they break up into smaller and smaller pieces. They become an item called microplastics. So microplastics can build up in the environment. And it's thought to find microplastics in every part of our natural environment now. They've been shown to accumulate within our bodies and within animals' bodies as well. And the chemicals that these plastics are made of can affect what's called our endocrine system. So that's our hormones. So this is needed on every part of your daily life. It's needed for sleep, it's needed for growth and development, reproduction, metabolism. So it's very important that that's not interrupted.
So it can really have a huge effect on lots of different things in our lives.
Definitely.
So when we're making plastics instead with organic materials, what was the term you used? It was
chitin.
Chitin. So what is the difference when we make bioplastics out of chitin instead of the plastics that we're making right now?
So chitin is the second most abundant natural biopolymer. So it's a natural product. You'd find it in the environment. Anyway, it's produced by not just langoustine, but it's produced by crab, mushroom, lobster, insect. So it's out there in abundance. So by using some of the natural products that we can get our hands on that are quite often going to waste or seen as a byproduct, we can find a much more kind of environmentally friendly alternative to the petrochemical plastics that we're used to. And if they do get into the environment, because these compounds such as chitin are natural, they will degrade through time in the environment much more quicker than your traditional petrochemical plastics would.
So on the CuanTec website, you talk about fitting into a circular economy. For people who haven't heard that term before, in as few words as possible, how would you describe a circular economy?
So the circular economy is about keeping products in use for longer, minimising waste, and finding a use for your byproducts.
So with CuanTec, you're using the byproducts from the fishing industry and you're repurposing them for use as plastics in our everyday lives.
Yeah, so we are basically working with the seafood industry predominantly, taking their waste langoustine shell. But as I said, we want to look into crab as well, lobster, taking as much of this waste that would effectively be going to landfill quite often. So we want to take their byproducts and find a use for them. We're creating an alternative to traditional plastics, which we want to basically develop as a food packaging. So there's a nice circular story there that we're taking seafood byproducts, their waste, and creating a packaging which could go into their food packaging. But not only that, CuanTec's process in extracting that chitin from the shell, we use a much more gentle, environmentally friendly process than you would traditionally extracting chitin. Traditionally, you use a lot of harsh chemicals at high temperatures. We use a much more biological method, again, kind of trying to keep natural. By doing this, it means that our own byproducts can be used. So within a langoustine shell, it's not just chitin you get protein and mineral as well. And because we're not using any harsh chemicals, it means our byproducts aren't contaminated. So we ourselves at CuanTec then want to ensure that our protein coming out of the shell has a use and the mineral from the shell also has a use. So we're making sure there's a minimal amount of waste ever going back into our environment.
Mm-hmm. So the things that you're creating and the byproducts, they can keep moving through this circular economy and keep being used again and again and again.
So, yep, keeping them in use for as long as possible.
That's fantastic. Definitely learn a lot from that. So you mentioned food packaging. Now, in 2019, CuanTec developed a film plastic made from langoustine shells, and this was kind of intended for commercial use and supermarket use. So what would it mean if major supermarkets started to use bioplastics like CuanTec's making?
So again, each year there's about an estimated 381 million tons of plastic created. To kind of put that in some sort of perspective, that's the equivalent to 381 Empire State Buildings worth of plastic produced.
That's a lot.
That's a massive amount of plastic. And by 2035, it's estimated we would be up to 762 Empire State Buildings worth of plastic being produced. So that's a massive amount of plastic. So I think ourselves as consumers, who are often the people at the end of the line left with these plastic packaging that we have to figure out how to recycle, can it be recycled, how do we dispose of it? I think if we can encourage retail to look at alternatives to plastic, so compostable options, I think that would make a massive difference to the amount of plastics that are getting produced, but also help to reduce the amount of plastic entering the oceans as well. Flexible film in the UK accounts for about a quarter of the plastics consumed. Only about 4% of that's recycled. So if we can find an alternative that isn't petrochemical based, that has compostable properties, then that would significantly reduce the amount of plastic that's in our environment. And it would also reduce that amount of petrochemical plastic that's being created in the first place.
That would really make a huge difference, going from 4% to being able to recycle so much more and keep using it for a longer time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. White, for joining us today. If you would like to learn more about climate innovations like we've been discovering here today, you can find them at glasgowsciencecentre.org on the Our World, Our Impact Hub, and you can follow us on Twitter at GSE1.